Welcome to An Idol Called Food. I am your host, JT Tapias, and in today's episode, we're going to be speaking about how to train your brain to overcome gluttony. This episode is sponsored by emptyyourbucketplan.com, a comprehensive 90-day approach to getting in the absolute best shape of your life. Go to emptyyourbucketplan.com, get your health journey started today. Without further ado, let's get into it. So, how to train your brain. Allow me to be a little poetic here, but I believe that every person is an extraordinary seed of potential. But that seed sprouts based on fertile ground, water, and exposure. So relating to the mind, environment, right, which is fertile ground, environment, exposure, which is who you surround yourself with, and then basically the idea here is that if these things are not happening for you, let's say, for example, you're not being exposed to the right environments, you're surrounding yourself with the wrong people, you're feeding your brain the wrong thing, most likely you're not tapping into potential, because we all have potential. We all come to this world with potential, and based on that potential, we tap into actions, and based on those actions, we get results. So then I can pretty much end this whole call by simply saying, well, all we have to really do is become very acquainted with our potential, right? Tap into that potential and get better results, get better actions and get better results. But it's more complicated. I also operate out of the belief system that we're made in the image of God, and therefore we are complete, right? I think oftentimes we beat ourselves up. I'm not this, I didn't have that. My mom didn't teach me XYZ thing. I grew up in a home where, all they ate was junk food, and that's why I am the way I am. Okay, all those things are, sure, I'm sure they've impacted you, but we have the possibility to change. And that's my experience and what I've seen for the past 23 years. And as cheesy as this sounds, it makes a lot of sense. We take couch potatoes, literally in their 50s, and make them into super potatoes in no time. Okay. I know it's cheesy, but it's so true. So true. I've seen 70-year-olds come to our program, 70-year-olds, guys, and absolutely transform their physical bodies and how they perform and how they feel and how they think. It's unbelievable, right? And so I believe we're equipped to show up as the best version of ourselves, regardless of race, gender, background, regardless of traumas, the things that we have experienced. I truly believe that we have the ability to do great things. And so that seed, which I'll call the mind, right, for the sake of what we're talking about here, is waiting to wake up, Waking up means being able to manage your operating system, your brain efficiently. But in order to wake up, you need to understand how to operate it. Last week, we talked a lot about how to operate this, how to reverse engineer things, how to become a better learner, what it means to be smart. So I think most people walked away last week understanding or thinking of things in a very different way. Not that you didn't know these things, just that you were reminded of these things. And I think that's very powerful. And that's what I'm here to do today, is to remind you. And so I keep using this analogy of the seed, but just like that seed that lives underneath the ground, right? And it's in darkness and it's damp, but one day it decides to wake up and it becomes a tree. I truly believe that once you guys wake up and you start to see things from a different perspective, this whole very visual, superficial idea of losing weight to simply or losing weight to simply look good or perform better can turn into something way, way bigger than this. Last week, I mentioned that we're wired to survive and not to thrive. Our mind, this ancient brain, is there to keep us alive. And so it throws at us all the curveballs possible so that we, don't kill ourselves, so that we don't go into ridicule, so that we are safe. That's what the brain does. And it's interesting because it's not until we get into the pit of pain and despair that we actually decide to wake up. When it comes to, most of you guys know I'm a Christian. I have a saying, and it says that we don't come to the feet of Christ skipping. I never see people come to the feet of Christ skipping. They usually come out of crisis. There's some kind of chaos, crisis that happens, and they finally decide to give up the steering wheel. Right? We have a tendency to do things out of desperation versus inspiration, and that's usually a bigger motivator. But I'm an optimist, so I don't think we have to get to that point of going into chaos and ending up with a bad doctor's report before we decide to do something about our health. Most of you guys here obviously have taken a leap of faith, and you are within that 1% of people that have decided to do things differently. And so this really calls for personal leadership. This whole thing we're doing here, guys, is personal leadership. It's leading yourself, right? The challenge is most people want to be led, but very little people actually want to lead their own lives. I know leaders that don't lead their own lives. They're leading other people. They're having a hard time leading themselves. Until we can actually lead ourselves well, we can't lead anyone else. And so this is about leadership. But actually, in order to live an extraordinary life, we have to really embrace these things. We have to practice these things on a daily basis. And so that means we need to know how to operate our brain in a very, very smart and efficient way. So what does that look like? I want to talk to you guys about virtue. And you know the word, but I want to give it a very different definition. And virtue in this particular case is not tied to any religious ideology, but instead a practical way to respond to adversity, temptation, or disappointment in a very effective way. It means responding and acting as the best version of yourself. So, for example, virtuous violinist plays the violin in an excellent way. In the same way, we're called to respond to adversity, temptation, or friction in our lives in an excellent way. Why do I say this? I say this because I hear conversations week after week after week about people that say, well, JT, I hear this a lot, actually. This week is a disaster. This week is not going so well. And I get it. Things happen, work and stress and whatever. But being a person of virtue means that regardless of what's happening around you, you respond as the best version of yourself. And so in order for you to respond with virtue, you need four pillars. There's 4 pillars to virtue. Number 1 is wisdom, which is the practical ability to live a rational life. What is that? What do you mean? Wait, JT, what do you mean the practical ability to live a rational life? I believe that we live very unconscious lives for the most part. I believe we wake up, we do the same things. We don't question whether it's right or wrong. We just get up and we're just automatic, right? We go to the same job. Well, not anymore. Things have changed now. But in the past, it was people would get up, go to work 20, 30 years, never question whether they could do better or if they were happy or not. They just kept doing the same thing over and over. But maybe with work, things have changed. But I know for sure that some of you guys wake up every single day. Hopefully not the people in this group, but I'm saying, before the Empty Your Bucket nutrition plan, or at least I hope, you would get up, you would run, get ready, get out the door, go to Starbucks, get a Frappuccino Chocolate Macchiato, and then, with some donuts, and then run straight to work, and then do it over and over and over again. So we live irrational lives. We don't stop and think. We're not introspective. So that first virtue is wisdom. We need rational wisdom. We need to be able to actually wake up and ask ourselves questions. Is the thing that I'm doing, is this thing actually, is it beneficial or is it breaking me? And then I got to get real with myself and get all the stories out of the way. I know easier said than done. And I need to start living a practical, rational life. If it doesn't serve me, I'll get it out of the way. When I came into these things of Christianity, sure, it was the Spirit of God empowering me to make many, many changes, but I had to make some practical changes in my life that were rational. It was a P&L statement, a profit and loss statement. I literally looked at the left side and I saw all the things that were getting me in trouble. And then I looked at the right side and I saw all the things that were beneficial to me. And I said, Done with the left side. No questions asked. 300 numbers deleted out of my phone of people that weren't influencing me in the right way. Places that I was going to that were triggering and tempting me, I got them out of the way. I literally cut off every possibility and opportunity for me to fail. That was a rational decision because I was fed up and I was sick and tired of being sick and tired. So we need wisdom, which is the practical ability to think rationally. Number two, you have to develop this sense of justice, which is a great desire to do well for others and yourself. That's what I was doing with that wisdom, was I was looking for justice for myself, right? A good example is if it's not, here's what's funny. Oftentimes I hear people say to their kids, don't eat that, that's unhealthy. But they're eating all the wrong things themselves. Right? That's not healthy, but you're eating all the wrong things yourself. So you need to get to a point where you start to think, I need to be congruent in my message, and whatever is not good for me is not good for them, vice versa. And you need to develop a sense of justice within you and look for what's right and what's good, right? Those things that are going to bear fruit in your life. Number three is courage, which, I hear all the time when you guys come onto this program, even, while you're going through the program, I'm just fearful of what's going to happen on Saturday. And I get it. That causes, a little bit of trepidation and anxiety to think, you're not going to make your weigh-ins and stuff like that, or you're going to go to a certain place and you're going to mess up your diet. When I hear that people are still struggling and are scared that they're going to fall when they go on a vacation or when they go to a person's house, I know that they haven't developed this intrinsic courage and have built this fortitude and this new identity. In other words, they haven't worked on their brain enough. And so when they get to that particular place, they fail miserably because they haven't built up that courage. And so being strong, regardless of consequences, you decide, right? The word decide means cutting off all other possibilities. I'm not doing that anymore. Yeah, okay, I'm going on the cruise. Well, I'm going to find whatever there is to eat and that's healthy, that's within the program as much as I can. And I'm just going to cut every other possibility off. Number four is discipline, which you guys hear me talk about all the time. And that is such a big word. And oftentimes it sounds like this big word that we all cringe when we hear. But discipline, very simply, is the ability to carry out effective habits on a daily basis, regardless of what our emotions inform us of. I don't want to do it. I'm doing it anyway. This is what serves me. This is the greater good. This is the sense of justice. This is this courage, the ability to move forward and do things, right? This is rational living. This is what I need to do. This is the right thing to do. I know I make it sound like it's easy. I get it. Things aren't easy, but I want to get across to you because these are things that I've done in my own life, not necessarily with food, but with other areas of my life that sequestered my brain and made me addicted. And so it can be done. That second part is serenity, right? And serenity, a serene mind, which we don't, this is a mind that basically doesn't stay away from or try to avoid difficult things like discomfort and temptation and adversity. But instead, when these things come, we're calm, collected in the face of these issues. Let me tell you that, I have to troubleshoot so many things throughout the week. And one of those things that I hear often with people is, I got into a situation and where I got to the office, they brought the donuts. They had, one of the pharmaceutical reps brought food in. I started to get all this pressure. I got all this anxiety, in other words, peer pressure, and I fell for this thing. And so in situations like that, we need a serene mind, right? That takes a deep breath, right? You bring some oxygen to your brain, right? And you start to basically bring those convictions and those things that you're going to do forth. So a serene mind. The problem oftentimes, and the thing I hear all the time, is that we blame things that happen to us. It's not the things that happen to us, but the interpretation of the things that actually happen to us that affect us. So any issue you have right now is exasperated by your interpretation. Any situation. You're like, you don't understand, JT. Yeah, but we make it worse because we promote things in our own head. And so we're constantly doing this campaign because once again, that brain is there to survive and not to thrive. So we're constantly making little things bigger things. We have ideas of things that happened in our childhood that we have blown out of proportion. And that still affects us to this day. When I was playing soccer, I think I was 10 years old. I was like 10 or 11 years old, and I was playing in Colombia, and I was in the minor divisions in Colombia. And, I had obviously already lived here in the US, and the vast majority of people that play soccer in Colombia are very low income people. It's the common sport. And so, especially when you're playing at the level that I was playing when I was 10. And so I already had, things stacked against me because they looked at me like the rich kid, even though I wasn't a rich kid, but, I had the nice cleats and the nice clothes, and I had lived in the US and I spoke English. And so, so coaches would always give me a hard time. Well, one time I was running with this other guy. We were racing, we were doing sprints, and I beat the guy 10 times. And the coach, I remember him saying this in front of me. He said, "I can't believe you let this little rich kid beat you." As silly as that sounds, that stayed with me my entire life. Like it just for some reason just broke me down. And now I use it as fuel. It's funny because when I'm at the gym or I'm running or I get tired, I always remember that and it makes me push harder. But for a long time, it brought me down. But the only difference was that I changed the interpretation of what that particular thing actually meant to me. At one point, it was disappointing. It was discouraging. I turned that story around and now I use it to fuel me, right? Versus break me down. And I have done that with many, many different things. I've shared my story with you guys before. I was homeless at the age of 14. The kids that I was going to school with didn't know. And so they used to call me the picture because I only had 2 outfits. Well, that was tough for a time. I remember, I remember clearly one day walking into school with this really ugly jacket I had, and these 2 kids looked at me and they were making fun of me. And I remember turning away and my eyes getting watery and just feeling self-pity. Well, that broke me down for a very long time. So I decided to change that story. Right. And I'm grateful and thankful that I went through that because that's what makes me the person I am today. I'm very grateful for everything I have. And I'm like, thank God I actually went through that. I know people that have never struggled and they're just super ungrateful. So I use all these examples and I share these anecdotes with you guys because same thing happens with food. Same thing happens with all the challenges that you're having currently. You're telling yourself certain stories, and based on those perceptions, those stories are impacting your actions. You don't have a weight problem. You have a story problem. I'll say that one more time. You don't have a weight problem. You have a story problem. It's what you tell yourself about food that actually affects you. It's those irrational thoughts that drive us absolutely insane. And usually what exacerbates these thoughts and these processes, these irrational thoughts, are exactly what we're trying to fix: lifestyle. And here's where I'm going to get into really practical things, guys. I've talked about this in other webinars, maybe a couple of weeks ago. And we were talking about clutter and how clutter at home, having a cluttered home, having a cluttered office, having a cluttered schedule, having a lot of drama and toxicity in your life steals your energy. Now, please hear me out. This is no like new age nonsense I'm talking here. I'm talking about mental energy. Okay, can we all agree that we have mental energy, mental real estate? And if that stuff is constantly busy figuring out problems, because the mind is there to resolve problems. So if you're constantly on Facebook scrolling watching fights, watching gossip, your brain is so tired of answering those questions because that's what the brain is doing. And if you're going home and your home is not organized, that's stealing the energy that you need for self-control and discipline in your life. If you're getting into all this drama with your friends and gossiping, that's stealing from you. That's robbing you. Overworking, going to bed late, overcommitting, all these things steal away from your ability to move forward, get healthy, perform better, and actually show up as the best version of yourself. Maybe you carry around a sense of failure because something didn't happen for you. And even worse, the subconscious idea that you could be doing better. Maybe you're in a job you dislike. That's stealing your energy. Now, please don't leave your job tomorrow. We all need to pay our bills. I get that. But whatever you tolerate, right? All those things that you have to tolerate steal your energy. Not talking about your spouse. You got to keep that one too. Okay. We got to work through that one. Okay. But what I'm trying to say is that there is such thing as mental real estate. We got to clear that mental real estate up. Because until we do that, we're not going to have the energy to change our interpretations of the stories that we have. So let's focus on what depends on us, because we can't do anything about our outside, us. You hear me talk about this all the time. Your thoughts, your emotions, and your actions are the only three things you can control. We are cognitive human beings. And so your thoughts, which encompass your interpretations, your perceptions, your internal world, your processing system. Okay. This is an accumulation of experiences, culture, habits, right? This is your internal world. And your emotions, right? We should express emotions, but we need to learn how to regulate. We need to learn how to modulate our emotions so that we suffer less than we should. Because if our thoughts are not right, our emotions are off, right? And then we're suffering. And if we're suffering, guess what? Our actions are going to suck, which is number 3, right? And so our actions are a byproduct of our thoughts, which impact our emotions and ultimately our actions. That alone, guys, for me, like when I understood this process that, hey, there's actually a sequence to how I do things, because I ask you guys sometimes like, hey, when you were about to eat that thing, like, how did you give yourself permission? And the answer is, oh no, I didn't even think about it. I'm like, well, you thought about it for nanoseconds, maybe. And that's why you don't realize that you actually had a thought, but we're cognitive human beings. So we think, we feel, and we act. How did you give yourself permission to do that thing? And so we need to really, really think through these things, that there's a sequence of thoughts, emotions, and actions. And we continue to think that your eating is out of control because you're stressed, nervous, fearful, big boned, Italian from the Midwest. You have a big appetite, whatever story you're telling yourself, then you're absolutely right, because that's exactly why you're battling with weight, because it's influencing your thoughts, your emotions, and your actions. And that's leading you to eat all the things that you shouldn't eat, which should give us a blueprint. Does that give us a blueprint? Like if you start, you're like, okay, wait. So like I have all these stories about why I eat the way I eat, and then it impacts my emotions, which then gives me permission to go do the thing. Then we can reverse engineer that and come up with a very different outcome. But in order to do all this, we need to conquer our internal dialogue, right? You know, guys, that we have more than 70,000 thoughts a day. They're all repetitive thoughts. They were all passed down from, our parents, our circle of influence, our culture, music, TV. This is why it's so important. People think I exaggerate because I don't listen or watch certain things. My friends make fun of me because Oh, you don't watch scary movies. I'm like, life is already scary. Like, like, why am I going to go traumatize myself for 90 minutes and put that garbage in my head? Right? I don't need that. Oh, it's just music. It's good rhythm. Yeah, but all these subliminal messages, your brain stays. You notice how sometimes you hear a song and it just sticks to you, right? Those waves go into your brain and stay there. And they become a big part of your internal dialogue. Music, the things you hear. Anyone ever hear growing up, money doesn't grow on trees? Right? Money doesn't grow on trees. For me, it was the opposite because you know my story. I grew up in a very messed up home, and I heard some crazy things like, you are whatever you have in your pocket. I heard very materialistic sayings like that growing up. I grew up in a crazy environment. And so what that did for me was, yeah, it pushed me to success, but it was toxic success because that's why I was striving to be a soccer player and make it and make a lot of money and travel the world and do all these things. But I had all the wrong motives. But it came as a byproduct of all the subconscious programming that I had from my childhood. Same thing happened to Mike Tyson. Mike Tyson at one point, Iron Mike, was the most feared man on planet Earth. He had enough money when he was 20 years old to live, 100 lives as a millionaire and lost all his money. He was very influenced by by fear and by negative emotions that pushed him to be the best. But when you are motivated by negative emotions, eventually it breaks you down and you lose it all. Those are called catabolic emotions. Those catabolic emotions propel people, but you can't sustain. You cannot sustain on catabolic thoughts. I'll leave you with this, and this is what I started with. I truly believe this. This is not me just selling you this idea. Every person is an extraordinary seed with the potential to sprout, right? But we need the right environment. We need to feed the right belief systems into our operating system. And we need to surround ourselves with the right people. If we can do that, you will scale, you will elevate. All these things that you're trying to do will become second nature because you're no longer forcing yourself to do these things. This is just who you are.